My daughter-in-law handed me a bouquet with a card that said, "Last flowers before the nursing home." At the end of the event, I took the microphone and revealed her secret. "I'm glad to have you here." Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought a bouquet of flowers could hurt so much. But there I was, Charlotte Wilson, 65 years old, sitting in the third pew of Oak Ridge Community Church on Mother's Day, holding a beautiful arrangement of pink roses and white lilies that might as well have been a slap across my face. My daughter-in-law Heather had handed them to me with that perfect smile of hers, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Happy Mother's Day, Charlotte," she'd said loudly enough for everyone around us to hear. Several women had turned to look, nodding approvingly. Such a thoughtful daughter-in-law, they must have thought. Then I opened the small envelope tucked between the blooms. The handwritten note inside read, "Last flowers before the nursing home." My hands trembled as I read those words again, making sure I hadn't misunderstood. The sanctuary suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. I glanced up to see Heather whispering something to my son William, her hand possessively wrapped around his arm. She caught my eye and smiled sweetly. This wasn't just a tasteless joke, it was a declaration of intent. For 3 years, Heather had been dropping hints about how difficult it must be for me to maintain my house, how worried she was about me living alone, how sensible it would be to consider my options while I still could. William always nodded along, rarely contradicting his wife of 8 years. I carefully folded the note and slipped it into my purse, forcing myself to breathe normally. Pastor Richards was finishing his sermon about honoring mothers, the irony, almost too much to bear. Around me, other mothers beamed as their families leaned in close, the church filled with genuine affection and respect. At the end of the service, families were invited to share what they appreciated about their mothers. One by one, people stood up, sons, daughters, even grandchildren, offering heartfelt words that brought tears and smiles. William remained seated, Heather's hand firmly on his knee. Something inside me snapped. After 65 years of being the peacekeeper, of swallowing my words to keep the peace, I'd reached my limit. "I'd like to say something," I said, raising my hand. Pastor Richards, surprised but pleased, handed me the microphone. My hands were steady now as I stood. "Thank you for this beautiful service honoring mothers," I began. "Being a mother has been the greatest joy of my life." I locked eyes with my son. William smiled uncertainly. "Being a mother means protecting your children, even when they're grown. It means speaking uncomfortable truths out of love." I paused, my heart pounding. "Today, I received these lovely flowers with a note saying these would be my last flowers before the nursing home." Gasps rippled through the congregation. William's face drained of color. "I'm not sharing this for sympathy," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "I'm sharing this because for 3 years, I've watched my daughter-in-law systematically try to separate me from my son. I've watched her control his finances, schedule, and relationships. I've been silent as she's spread rumors about my mental capacity, despite my clean bill of health just last month." Heather's face contorted with fury. She grabbed William's arm, whispering urgently. "I'm not going to any nursing home," I said firmly, "and I'm no longer going to pretend this behavior is acceptable. Families should lift each other up, not tear each other down." I handed the microphone back to Pastor Richards, whose face reflected shock and compassion. As I walked down the aisle toward the exit, the silence was deafening. Some people stared at their hymnals, unable to meet my eyes. Others watched me with newfound respect. Behind me, I could hear Heather's controlled voice. "Charlotte's been so confused lately. This is exactly what we've been worried about." I pushed open the heavy doors of the church and stepped into the May sunshine, my heart pounding and my mind racing. For the first time in years, despite the pain and uncertainty ahead, I felt truly free. The bouquet of flowers lay abandoned on the pew, its beauty marred by the cruelty it had carried. The phone hadn't rung in 7 days. I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of cooling tea between my hands, staring at the silent device as if I could will it to life. Outside, spring rain tapped against the windows of the home I'd lived in for 30 years. The home where I'd raised William after his father died. The home Heather now wanted me out of. The text message from William had come just hours after the church incident. "You've embarrassed us all. Heather is devastated. I need space right now." Space. That's what they called it now when you cut your mother out of your life. I traced the rim of my teacup, remembering how different things had been before Heather. William used to visit twice a week, sometimes just dropping by with coffee, on his way to work. We'd talk about everything and nothing. His job at the architectural firm, my volunteer work at the library, the latest book we'd both read. There was an easiness between us, the kind that comes from years of truly knowing someone. Then came Heather, with her perfectly highlighted hair and marketing executive title. I'd been happy for William at first. He deserved love after his difficult divorce from Marie. But I noticed the changes almost immediately. First, the spontaneous visits stopped. Everything had to be scheduled through Heather. Then came the missed birthdays, the abbreviated holiday visits, the sudden cancellations whenever I suggested spending time with just William. Gradually, my son became a stranger who resembled someone I used to know. "You're smothering him," Heather had told me once, her voice honey-sweet with venom. "He has his own life now. You should find one too." The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. I should be angry, I thought. Instead, all I felt was a profound sadness, a hollowness that seemed to echo inside me. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought it might be William. Instead, when I opened the door, I found Margaret Collins from church, clutching a casserole dish. "I thought you might need this," she said, her eyes kind but uncomfortable. "Chicken and wild rice." "Thank you, Margaret," I replied, accepting the dish. "Would you like to come in?" She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder at her car. "I'm afraid I can't stay. Book club meeting." I knew she was lying. The book club met on Thursdays, not Tuesdays. But I nodded anyway, understanding her discomfort. People never knew what to do with uncomfortable truths. "Charlotte," Margaret said suddenly, lowering her voice, "what you did was brave. Many of us have seen how Heather treats you, but—" She hesitated again. "William came by Pastor Richard's office yesterday. He's saying you've been showing signs of confusion, that you've been imagining slights." The weight of her words settled over me like a heavy blanket. So that was their strategy. Make me seem mentally unstable, and no one would believe me. Did he bring my medical records from Dr. Lawson? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "The ones from my comprehensive checkup last month that showed I'm perfectly healthy?" Margaret looked down. "Charlotte, no one wants to take sides. Thank you for the casserole," I said quietly, beginning to close the door. "Give my regards to the book club that isn't meeting today." Alone again, I placed the untouched casserole in the refrigerator and returned to my cold tea. My hand drifted to my purse, where I'd kept Heather's cruel note as evidence. Opening it, I felt a chill run through me. The note was gone. I emptied the contents of my purse onto the table, searching frantically. Nothing. Someone had taken it, likely while I'd left my purse in the pew during my impromptu speech. Without that note, it was my word against Heather's. 3. Realization of how vulnerable I truly was crashed over me. William had medical power of attorney for me, something I'd done years ago after a brief hospitalization. I'd trusted my son completely. Now that trust felt like a weapon pointed directly at me. For the first time, I considered that Heather's joke about a nursing home might not be just spite. It could be their actual plan. A plan that, with William's legal power and Heather's manipulations, they could potentially execute against my will. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the roof like anxious fingers. My home, my sanctuary, suddenly felt less secure. I was alone, being painted as mentally unstable and facing the very real possibility of losing my independence. As darkness fell, I made myself a simple dinner, barely tasting the food. The silence of the house pressed in around me. No call from William, no apology, no reassurance that everything would be okay. Instead, my phone pinged with a text message. Not from William, but from a number I didn't recognize. "Charlotte, it's Diane from the church choir. I saw what happened on Sunday. I've been through something similar. Call me if you want to talk. You're not alone." I stared at the message for a long time, a tiny spark of hope flickering to life within me. Maybe I wasn't completely alone after all. I stared at Diane's phone number for 2 days before I finally called her. Something about reaching out felt like admitting defeat, acknowledging that my life had spiraled beyond my control. But as the silence from William stretched into its second week, I realized I needed someone who understood. We met at Rosie's Diner, a small place on the outskirts of town where neither of us was likely to run into church members. Diane was older than me by a few years, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob, her eyes kind but weathered by experience. "I wasn't sure you'd call," she said, stirring her coffee. "Most people don't. They try to handle it alone." "Handle what exactly?" I asked, though I already knew. "Elder abuse," she said plainly. "Emotional manipulation. Isolation. What your daughter-in-law is doing? It's textbook." The words landed like stones in still water. I'd been so focused on the hurt, on William's betrayal, that I hadn't named what was happening. "My daughter did the same thing," Diane continued. "Started with little comments about my memory. Then she took over my finances to help. Before I knew it, I was sitting in a care facility, wondering how I'd lost control of my life. My hands tightened around my cup. "How did you get out?" A small smile touched her lips. "I met Greta. She runs a support group for seniors experiencing family estrangement and abuse. She helped me understand my rights, connect with resources. Most importantly, she helped me see I wasn't alone." She slid a small card across the table. "We meet Thursdays, at the community center. No pressure, but it might help." I pocketed the card. Not committing, but not refusing either. "There's something else you should know," Diane said, her voice lower now. "Heather's been talking, telling people at church that you've been behaving erratically for months, that the Mother's Day incident was just the latest episode." My stomach nodded. "And people believe her?" "Some do. She's very convincing. And William backs up everything she says." The betrayal cut deep. My own son, the little boy I'd raised alone after his father died when he was only 10, was helping dismantle my reputation and independence. "What does she want?" I whispered, though I already suspected. "Your house, probably. Your savings. Control." Diane's eyes met mine, unflinching. They usually want something tangible. The psychological warfare is just a means to an end. I thought about my modest 3-bedroom home, purchased with the life insurance money after my husband died. It wasn't grand, but it was in a good neighborhood where property values had tripled. And there was the small inheritance from my parents, which I'd carefully preserved. "I should go," I said, suddenly overwhelmed. "Thank you for the coffee, Charlotte." Diane called as I stood to leave. Thursday, 2 p.m., just think about it. The community center was a plain brick building that had seen better days. I sat in my car for 15 minutes on Thursday, debating whether to go inside. Through the window, I could see a circle of chairs being arranged in a room off the main hallway. An older woman with a bright red scarf was setting out water and cookies. Finally, I gathered my courage and walked in. The woman with the scarf, Greta, greeted me immediately. "You must be Charlotte. Diane mentioned you might come." Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct. "We're just getting started." There were 8 others in the circle, men and women ranging from their 60s to their 80s. Each face told a story of pain, resilience, and a determination I desperately needed. As they shared their stories, the son who gradually took over his mother's finances until she had no access to her own money, the daughter who convinced doctors her father was incompetent so she could sell his farm, the grandson who isolated his grandmother from friends and other family. I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't alone. What was happening to me wasn't unique or deserved. It was a pattern, recognizable and, most importantly, resistible. When my turn came, I spoke haltingly at first, then with growing certainty as I described Heather's systematic campaign, William's complicity, and my growing fear. "The medical power of attorney is concerning," Greta said when I finished, "but fixable. We have a volunteer lawyer who helps our members with exactly these issues. And in the meantime, we need to get you connected with resources to document your mental competency independently." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Not just for survival, but for reclaiming my life. As the meeting ended, people exchanged phone numbers and hugs. An elderly man named Thomas pressed a book into my hands, a guide to elder rights and legal protections. "Knowledge is power," he said simply, "and you're stronger than you think." Walking back to my car, I realized something had changed. The fear was still there, but alongside it was something new: resolve. I wasn't going to be a victim in this story. I was going to fight. The morning after my first support group meeting, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The fog of confusion and hurt had lifted, replaced by a sense of purpose that propelled me out of bed before sunrise. My first call was to Dr. Lawson, my physician of 20 years. "Charlotte," he said warmly, "what can I do for you?" "I need comprehensive cognitive testing," I said without preamble. "And I need the results documented formally." There was a brief pause. "May I ask why?" I explained the situation: Heather's manipulations, William's power of attorney, the rumors about my mental state. Dr. Lawson's tone grew increasingly concerned. "Come in this afternoon," he said finally. "We'll start the process immediately." Next call was to Sandra Boyd, the volunteer lawyer Greta had recommended. She listened calmly as I outlined my situation, asking pointed questions about my assets, legal documents, and family dynamics. "This is unfortunately common," she said when I finished. "But we have options. First, we revoke that power of attorney. Then we create new advance directives with someone trustworthy as your agent." "I don't have anyone," I admitted, the words painful to speak aloud. "You will," Sandra assured me. "That's what your support group is for, building a network of people who have your best interests at heart." By the end of the week, I had undergone cognitive testing. Results: excellent. Revoked William's power of attorney, and filed a formal letter with my bank requiring my in-person verification for any significant withdrawals or changes. But the most transformative step came unexpectedly. After our second support group meeting, Greta approached me with a flyer. "The community center is looking for a part-time mentor for their intergenerational program," she said. "Seniors working with teens after school. I thought of you immediately." Me? I was stunned. "But I haven't worked since I retired from teaching 5 years ago." "Exactly. Greta said with a smile. You have experience with young people and time on your hands. Plus, she added more gently, it would be good for you to build a life outside of William and Heather's influence. The intergenerational program was housed in a bright room at the community center, walls covered with artwork and bookshelves stuffed with resources. 5 other seniors were already volunteering, helping teens with everything from homework to college applications to simply having someone who listened. Maria Santos, the program director, greeted me warmly. We especially need help with our creative writing program, she explained. Many of our teens struggle to express themselves, and having a supportive adult guide them makes all the difference. I thought about my years teaching English, the joy I'd felt watching students discover their voices. I think I can help with that, I said. That afternoon, I met Zoe, a quiet 16-year-old with bright blue hair and eyes that had seen too much. I hate writing, she announced as we sat down together. That's okay, I replied, unfazed. We can just talk instead. By the end of our session, she had filled 3 pages with her thoughts on the unfairness of her school's dress code. She didn't even realize she was writing until it was done. Same time next week? She asked, trying to sound casual. I'll be here, I promised. As the weeks passed, my days developed a new rhythm. Mornings were for practicalities, meeting with Sandra, organizing my finances, documenting my independence and capability through photos, receipts, and daily journals. Afternoons were for the community center, where I now worked with 5 regular students who actually seemed disappointed if I missed a session. Evenings, once the loneliest part of my day, became time for new pursuits. I joined a beginner's computer class at the library, determined to navigate the digital world that had always intimidated me. Thomas from the support group introduced me to his community garden group, where I discovered the satisfaction of growing my own vegetables. I still thought about William every day, the ache of his absence never quite subsiding. Twice I'd driven past his architectural firm, hoping for a glimpse of him, wondering if he ever thought about me with the same longing. But the anger that had initially consumed me was fading, replaced by something more complex. The bittersweet understanding that I had to build a life that didn't depend on his presence. 1 month after Mother's Day, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Mom, we need to talk. Christmas dinner at our house. William. I stared at the message, my heart racing. After weeks of silence, after all the pain and betrayal, this terse demand disguised as an invitation. 6 months away, yet presented as if nothing had happened. My hands trembled slightly as I typed my response, then paused before sending it. The old Charlotte would have accepted immediately, grateful for any crumb of attention from her son. The new Charlotte had learned something vital. I deserved more than crumbs. I deleted the draft and set my phone aside. This wasn't a decision I needed to make today, or even this week. I had time to consider what was best for me, not just what would please William or appease Heather. For now, I had seeds to plant in the community garden, a writing workshop to prepare for my teens, and friends coming over for dinner. Friends who saw me clearly and valued what they saw. The woman I was becoming would know exactly how to answer William when the time was right. The months between Mother's Day and Christmas passed in a blur of activity and growth. By December, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The community center had hired me part-time to oversee their expanded writing program. My garden plot had yielded enough vegetables to share with neighbors and friends. I'd even started a small blog about senior independence, encouraged by my computer class instructor. I thought about William's text message daily, turning it over in my mind like a smooth stone. After months of consideration and conversations with my support group, I'd finally decided to accept his Christmas invitation, but on my own terms. The day arrived cold and clear, snow dusting the ground like powdered sugar. I dressed carefully, in a deep burgundy sweater and charcoal slacks, adding my mother's pearl necklace, a touch of armor for what lay ahead. In my purse was a folder containing my complete neurological evaluation, legal documents revoking William's power of attorney, and photos of my active, independent life. As I pulled into William and Heather's driveway, my hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. Their house was decorated elaborately for Christmas, lights twinkling from every eave, a giant inflatable Santa bobbing in the yard. Perfectly festive, perfectly excessive, just like Heather herself. William opened the door before I could knock. He looked tired, I thought, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "Mom," he said, his voice formal. "Come in." The house smelled of pine and cinnamon, Christmas carols playing softly from hidden speakers. William led me to the living room where Heather sat primly on the sofa, wearing a green velvet dress that matched the tree behind her. "Charlotte," she greeted me, her smile tight. "So glad you could make it." I settled into an armchair, noting the distance they both maintained. No hugs, no warmth, just polite formality. "It's been a long time," I said simply. William cleared his throat. "Mom, before we have dinner, we wanted to talk to you about what happened in May." He glanced at Heather, who nodded encouragingly. "Your behavior at church was concerning. We've been worried about you." My heart pounded, but my voice remained steady. "My behavior? You mean when I responded to being told I was headed for a nursing home?" Heather sighed dramatically. "That's exactly what we mean, Charlotte. You completely misinterpreted a light-hearted note. It was just a silly joke." "A joke," I repeated, reaching into my purse. "Like how you've been telling people I'm confused. Having episodes? Losing my grip on reality?" William shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, we're concerned about your mental health. That's all." "Fortunately, I have excellent doctors," I replied, withdrawing the folder and placing it on the coffee table. Dr. Lawson conducted a full neurological and cognitive evaluation in June. The results are there if you'd like to see them. Perfect scores across the board. William didn't reach for the folder. Heather's smile faltered. "We've also noticed you've been making some questionable financial decisions," William continued, following what was clearly a rehearsed script. "We thought it might be time to discuss simplifying things. Maybe selling the house, moving somewhere with more support." "William," I interrupted gently, "I've revoked your medical power of attorney, and I've implemented additional security measures on all my financial accounts." The silence that followed was deafening. Heather's face flushed red. "You've what?" William finally said. "I've taken back control of my life," I answered, my voice surprisingly calm. "And I'm here today to tell you that while I still love you, William, I won't be manipulated or pushed aside." Heather stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. William, tell her this is ridiculous." But William was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Surprise, certainly, but perhaps also a grudging respect. "There's something else you should know," I continued. "I've been hired as the creative writing program coordinator at the community center. I was even interviewed for the local paper last week about our intergenerational initiatives." That's wonderful, Mom," William said, sounding genuinely surprised. Heather wasn't having it. "A little part-time charity work doesn't mean you're capable of—" "I'm not finished," I interrupted, meeting her gaze directly. "I'm also being considered for a speaking role at next month's conference on active aging. They were particularly interested in my perspective on family dynamics and elder independence." Heather's eyes widened. "You wouldn't dare speak publicly about—" "About what, Heather?" I asked innocently. "About how families sometimes mistake independence for incapacity? About how even well-meaning relatives can undermine a senior's autonomy? It's all very academic, of course." The threat was clear. If they continued their campaign against me, I wouldn't remain silent. William placed a restraining hand on Heather's arm. "I think we should have dinner now," he said firmly. "Mom's right. We need to respect her independence." Heather's mouth opened and closed wordlessly before she stormed toward the kitchen. Dinner was a tense affair. Heather barely spoke, focusing intensely on cutting her turkey into increasingly smaller pieces. William made awkward attempts at conversation, asking about my garden and computer classes with the air of someone discovering a stranger. As I drove home that night, snowflakes dancing in my headlights, I felt an odd mixture of sadness and triumph. The relationship with my son had fundamentally changed, perhaps permanently. But I had stood my ground. I had spoken my truth. And for the first time in years, they had actually heard me. 1 year after the Mother's Day that changed everything, I stood in my living room surrounded by colorful balloons and the warm chatter of friends. My 66th birthday celebration was in full swing, a gathering I had planned myself, inviting the people who had become my chosen family over the past 12 months. Greta was by the window, laughing with Thomas as they debated the merits of different tomato varieties for our community garden. Maria from the community center was showing photos of our teen writer's recent published anthology to anyone who would look. Zoe, my blue-haired writing student, now sporting purple streaks, was setting out cupcakes she had baked herself, each one decorated with a tiny fondant book. I caught my reflection in the mirror and paused, struck by the woman looking back at me. She stood straighter than she had a year ago. Her eyes were brighter, her smile more genuine. She looked happy. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. When I opened the door, I felt the air leave my lungs in a rush. William stood on my porch, alone, holding a small wrapped package. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Happy birthday." For a moment, I couldn't speak. It had been nearly 4 months since our tense Christmas dinner, with only a handful of brief, formal texts between us since then. "William," I finally managed. "I wasn't expecting you." He shifted uncomfortably. "I should have called first. I can see you're having a party." "No, it's fine. Please come in." As he followed me inside, I watched my friends notice his arrival. Greta gave me a subtle nod of support. Zoe, who had heard plenty about my son during our writing sessions, observed him with unconcealed curiosity. "Your house looks different," William commented, glancing around. "It's nice." He was right. Over the past year, I'd transformed my living space along with my life, repainting the walls in warm yellows and blues, replacing heavy curtains with light-filtering blinds, adding bookshelves for my expanding collection of poetry and memoirs. "Thank you," I replied. "Would you like something to drink? There's punch and coffee." Coffee would be great. In the kitchen, away from curious eyes, William set the package on the counter and took a deep breath. "Mom, I owe you an apology." "A big one." I busied myself with pouring his coffee, unsure how to respond. "Heather and I are separated," he continued, his voice low. "Have been for about 2 months now." I turned to face him, surprised. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be," he said with a sad smile. "It was a long time coming. After Christmas, I started seeing things more clearly. The way she talked about you, the way she tried to control everything. I realized it wasn't just about you. It was about me, too." I handed him the coffee, our fingers briefly touching. "What happened?" William sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I found some emails. She'd been talking to a real estate agent about your house, getting estimates, discussing quick sale options. She even had draft documents drawn up that would have given us power over your assets. Documents she somehow thought I could get you to sign. The revelation should have shocked me. But after everything, it merely confirmed what I had long suspected. When I confronted her, She didn't even deny it, William continued. She just said it was for your own good, and that I needed to be a man and handle my mother. That's when I knew I had to leave. I leaned against the counter, absorbing his words. I'm sorry it came to this, William. I'm the one who should be sorry, Mom. I let her come between us. I believed her when she said you were slipping, even though everything I knew about you contradicted that. I failed you. The simple admission, the acknowledgement of truth I had waited so long to hear, felt like a key turning in a long rusted lock. I've missed you, he said, his voice breaking slightly. I've missed my mom. Before I could respond, Zoe appeared in the doorway. Charlotte, everyone's waiting for you to blow out your candles, she announced, eyeing William suspiciously. I'll be right there, I promised. To William, I added, will you stay? He hesitated. Are you sure? This is your day with your friends. I don't want to intrude. You won't be intruding, I said. But things are different now. I'm different. I can see that, he said, with what seemed like genuine admiration. You seem stronger, happier. I confirmed. I've built a life I love, William. A life that's mine. If you want to be part of it, I'd welcome that. But it has to be on terms of mutual respect. He nodded slowly. I understand, and I want to try. As we rejoined the party, I introduced William to my friends, watching as he made a genuine effort to connect with these people who had become so important to me. When Thomas shared stories about our community garden mishaps, William laughed. When Maria mentioned the teen writing program, he asked thoughtful questions. When Zoe grudgingly admitted she wanted to study architecture in college, his face lit up as he offered to show her his firm's projects sometime. Later, after the candles had been blown out and gifts opened, I found myself standing on my back porch with William, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Your present? He said suddenly, remembering the small package he'd set aside earlier. You never opened it? I unwrapped it carefully to find a silver picture frame. Inside was a faded photograph I hadn't seen in years. Me, holding 5-year-old William on my lap as we read a book together, both of us laughing at something long forgotten. I found it when I was packing my things, he explained. It reminded me of who we used to be. Who we could be again, maybe. I traced the edge of the frame, emotion tightening my throat. I'd like that, I said finally, but it will take time. I have time, he said simply. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I thought about the journey of the past year, from humiliation to liberation, from isolation to community, from fear to strength. The Mother's Day bouquet that had once symbolized such cruelty had ironically been the catalyst for my transformation. I had lost the comfort of blind trust, but gained something far more valuable: self-reliance, true friendship, and a sense of purpose that no one could take from me. And maybe, just maybe, I was gaining back a son who saw me clearly at last. Happy birthday, Mom, William said softly beside me. For the first time in a very long time, it truly was.